Well, we're delighted to say that friend of the station, Phil Brown, is back in football management. He has taken over initially to the end of the season with a great old club, Kidderminster Harriers.
Fantastic, proper club.
And we're delighted to say that Phil joins us now. Good afternoon, Phil.
Hello, Phil.
Good afternoon, guys. You okay?
Yeah, we're good, thank you. Congratulations. Good to be back in.
It is, Paul. It really, don't get me wrong, when I sit here and it's a nice part of the world where I'm living now, and it's okay walking the dogs and this, that and the other, but you do really miss it, you know, when you've been involved in football for so long and, 45 years in the game now. You're just wondering whether there's another episode, possibly, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Another episode in my career, another episode in somebody else's career. And when the Kidderminster chairman and more importantly, I think, where Dean Holdsworth was concerned, he was on the board of directors now. He's director of football.
Mm.
And Dean knew what I was capable of doing. They've watched quite closely what I was doing at Barrow, of all places, last year, and the survival campaign that went on there. That was only 9 games, but we needed to get something like 3 wins from the 9, which we achieved. But I unfortunately missed out on a nice 2-year deal. And it's great to see, it's got to say, it's great to see Pete Wild just took up the mantle, and he's certainly challenging for promotion in the second division. So it's amazing when you do survive. It's amazing what you can actually achieve the following season, regardless of who's in charge.
You come in at a difficult time for the club. We were talking to Steve Morrison the other day. He's just gone into Sutton to find himself at the wrong end of League Two. So it's a challenge, but this is why jobs like this come up, isn't it, really?
That's true. And I've looked long and hard at the reasons why, and you think, is there a bad changing room? Is it a bunch of players that don't care? But sometimes when you analyse results, and it has to be said, Kidderminster Harriers have been beaten probably 7 or 8 times in the last 12 games after being, I think they played Chesterfield, who are absolutely flying away with the National League. Absolutely, Charlie, But in them 7 or 8 defeats, it's the odd goal. And you think to yourself, well, is that a mentality? Is that a mindset? When the opposition score first, does everybody say, here we go again? So there's certain things I think that I need to work on. The mindset of the players first and foremost. They're not a bad team. They're not a bad team. I might have to tweak 1 or 2 in terms of ins and outs now that it's January. Everybody's trying to do that. But it's really the mindset of, you're involved in a game of football. 1 goal doesn't necessarily win a game. And if we now, not they, if we can now turn them defeats into draws and the draws into victories, I know you've probably heard that a million times, but it is achievable with a group of players that are not getting pasted week in and week out. It's the odd goal that's deciding games of football.
It's the way, isn't it? I mean, I've watched the Vanarama National League through supporting Torquay United for the last 4 or 5 years. And if you can go on a run, which often happens because every team is beatable, because the players are playing in that division normally because they've got a mistake in them, or they're not quite as quick as they once were, or they're playing at the top of their level or the bottom of their level. So often if you can get some consistency with those players, which is what I can imagine your experience brings, Phil.
It's interesting what you're saying, Charlie, because we're all after a level of consistency in every working life every day that we live, whether you're in radio, whether you're in TV, whether you're in football, whatever it is, we're looking for a level of consistency in performance. And if you can achieve that, you then move up the ladder and you go further afield and you become, if you want to call it, wealthier, richer, more famous, whatever your goal is. Our goal is quite short term at the moment. My goal is to be Kidderminster Harriers manager next season. Now that, for me, is a short-term goal. It's an 18-game plan. The short-term goal is to start winning, that habit of winning. Now, when you've only won 4 out of 28, obviously the bad habits are inherent in that system, and you've got to go in there with a positive outlook. You've got to go in there with an outlook that you don't become a bad player overnight. You don't become a bad manager overnight. And collectively, as a club, we don't become a bad club overnight. As you made reference to, it's got a wealthy history of predominance in the lower leagues, and I think if we last season, for instance, they won 10 or 11 on the bounce at the end of the season to get promoted. It is capable, but you've got to start somewhere, and the run has to start now.
Good stuff. It's been interesting since the holidays. I mean, including a spell in a spell in India, in the Indian Super League. I mean, I suppose you take experiences and sort of carry on from every job you do. I mean, what was your experience of were you at Pune City, weren't you?
Yeah. I went to Pune City, and then the franchise in India, the franchise was sold from under my feet. I knew nothing about it, and it moved to Hyderabad. So everybody, lock, stock, and barrel, moves to Hyderabad.
Wow.
Which it sounds like you're moving next door. It's far from it. It's about a 3-hour flight.
Wow.
If any. So I'm not expecting anything like that to be happening where,
Kidderminster.
Kidderminster. But it's about an hour and a half from where I live. It's not like, when I was living in Oxfordshire and going up to Manchester to train the team at Barrow, and it's a 6-hour journey to come back home on a Saturday night. It was a tiresome toll. It took its weight out of a manager in terms of the energy levels that he can produce. This is an hour and a half it's around the corner. It's around the block as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I'll be up and at him, Paul. I'll be up and at him, and I'll be trying to drum home belief systems, and trying to get that across as soon as I possibly can. I've got a head start in the fact that Dean Holdsworth's in there. He's been in there 7 weeks. I'm not saying this has been a plan of ours or anything like that. I got a phone call literally on Tuesday morning when they'd moved or parted company with the previous management team. Now, unfortunately, the previous management team, they were 3 or 4 years at the helm. I think that's brilliant. For your first effort in football management, to be there 3 or 4 years is outstanding, to have a promotion on your CV. And it was probably, Russ will probably tell you, it was probably time to move on. I'm going to be meeting the assistant manager or the joint management team. One part of them are taking the game on Saturday, which I think is right. It's an FA Trophy game. It's against Altrincham. I'll be in the stand watching the game for sure, because I want to. This is a better way of looking at the team without sneaking around, as it were. Whatever you want to do in terms of football, the world of football. Sometimes you've got to sneak in the back door and watch a game of football and get out, and then 2 weeks later you're manager. That's not the case. It's a case of everything's above board. I want to be there on Saturday to see the players, maybe introduce myself. I don't know, but work really starts in earnest on Monday for me.
Good stuff. Great stuff, yeah. Couple of loans, couple of good loan signings, put a few wins together. We're right behind you, Phil.
Get Bullard
out. Are you two available?
Well, see if we can get Bullard out of retirement.
That'd be what you need.
Stick Dean
Jermaine Pennant was the one when we played, wasn't it, Phil? He was incredible.
Did you see any talent in that Talksport game you think you might want to be putting some calls in?
Brazil on the touchline, that's about it.
And what about Dino? What about Dean Holdsworth out of retirement to play up top? I mean, he hasn't played he probably hasn't played for about 15 years. Is there? Maybe that is pushing it a bit.
I do a disservice to Dino, and being my new boss, I've got to be careful what I say, but when I went into Derby County, I took Dino as assistant manager. We go back that far. And seriously, I was lacking in any kind of stature up front, and I actually dragged him out of retirement.
Wow.
And to be fair, to be brutally honest to him, I'm talking 15 years ago, he was still putting himself about. But he had a reputation, and he had a target on his back, and it was championship football, and he was getting found out, from a fitness point of view. But he was a great exponent of the professional game, shall we call it? He knew how to work the line. Picked
up some tricks at Bolton and at Wimbledon. Certainly. Well, good to talk to you, Phil. We wish you well with the new job.
Best of luck.
Guys, thank you.
All the best. There's Phil Brown there, the new manager of Kidderminster Harriers, currently at the